In this fire ecology story, I want to consider whether severe fire, like the one you see here, is a natural part of a given conifer forest. This is important because if a forest type is burning more severely than it did historically, due to fuel buildup or climate change or whatever, we might need to do something about it. Like maybe thin the forest so that it supports low severity rather than high severity crown fire. So how do we determine whether the current fire regime of a forest type is out of whack or not? The first thing you have to do is recognize that all fire regimes consist of two basic fire types, stand replacement and understory fires. Mixed severity fires are merely combinations of different amounts of stand replacement and understory fire. But all mixed severity fire regimes include severe fire. You have to remember that. You can't get severe fire patches without severe fire. The same basic categories are used in the government's land fire database. Look at the 5 regime groups represented here. Only Group 1 is an entirely low severity regime. All other groups involve replacement, stand replacement fires or high severity components. A map of the distribution of the government's land fire regime groups shows that Group 1, the low severity group, covers very little of forested land throughout the West. Indeed, most forested land supports regimes with a stand replacement component. You can also obtain a broader fire regime picture for the West from subjective information presented in textbooks written by experts like Steve Arno and Carl Fiedler. In this table, for example, it's clear that the only conifer forest types for which understory fire is a major part of the fire regime are sequoia, oak woodland, and oak's not a conifer forest type, ponderosa pine west of the divide, and coastal redwood forests. Everything else, and that would be basically conifer forest types that cover most of the West, is characterized by mixed to high severity fire regimes. Sources of quantitative data from the Pacific Northwest show that severe fire is relatively common to most of the forest types under consideration there too. Here's a table from AG, for example, showing that forest types harboring a frequent fire regime, the regime characterized by short 15-year fire cycles, accounts for only 1.4 of 9.4 million acres across the Pacific Northwest, or only about 15% of the forest lands, a small fraction. Thus, severe fire is pervasive throughout the West, and literature suggesting that most western forests are out of whack and suffer from severe fire is badly misguided. Although the out of whack story may apply fine to dry ponderosa pine forest types, those forests make up only 10 to 15% of the land in the West. According to our own analysis based on land fire data, about 85% of forest lands support mixed to high severity fire regime. Even the ponderosa pine forest types, in those, the role of large and intense disturbances, that is high severity, influencing ponderosa pine forest dynamics and structures not well understood and often overlooked. I hope the prevalence of severe fire in conifer forests is clear by now. Severe fires are natural disturbance events in most conifer forest types throughout the West. We need to dump the dogmatic viewpoint that severe fire effects are unnatural and concentrate instead on keeping our communities safe so we can let fires burn the way they always have. Thanks for listening, and join me next time for another fire ecology story.